Dr. Kim Nari stood at the observation deck of the New Sol research ship, watching the blue and silver planet below. The ship had been in orbit around Vorthan Prime for 3 weeks now. Everything seemed peaceful. The crystal cities on the surface looked beautiful under the alien sun. The Vorthan people had welcomed them with what appeared to be genuine friendship. "Mom, look at this," called her daughter Hannah from across the deck. The 15-year-old girl was holding a small device the Vorthans had given her. It projected tiny holographic animals that danced in the air above her palm. Nari smiled. This was exactly why she had brought Hannah on the mission. The youth education program was designed to show young humans that not all alien species were hostile. First contact could be beautiful, peaceful, and educational. "It's wonderful, honey," Nari said, walking over to her daughter. "The Vorthans certainly know how to make impressive technology." Hannah grinned and made the holographic creatures perform little tricks. A tiny dragon breathed harmless light fire while a small bird sang a melody that sounded like crystal bells. Ambassador Park approached them, his face showing the satisfaction of a successful diplomat. "Dr. Kim, the Vorthans have agreed to let us visit their capital city tomorrow. King Veltar himself wants to meet our delegation." Nari nodded. "That's excellent news. I'm particularly interested in seeing their biomedical facilities. Their healing technology could revolutionize human medicine. And I get to see the royal palace," Hannah added excitedly. "Commander Lee said it's made entirely of living crystal that changes colors." The next morning, they took a shuttle down to the planet's surface. Nari wore her best diplomatic uniform, while Hannah had chosen a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. 12 other humans accompanied them, including Ambassador Park, Commander Lee, and several scientists from different fields. The Vorthan capital was even more impressive from ground level. The buildings seemed to grow from the earth itself, their crystal walls pulsing with soft light. Vorthan citizens walked the streets in flowing robes, their tall, elegant forms moving with fluid grace. Their skin had a faint bluish tint, and their eyes were large and silver. "Welcome, honored guests from Earth," said a Vorthan official who met them at the landing pad. His name was Counselor Tarn, and he spoke perfect English. "King Veltar is eager to meet you all." They traveled through the city in hover vehicles that made no sound. Hannah pressed her face against the window, watching the crystal spires pass by. Everything looked so peaceful, so advanced, so perfect. The royal palace was massive, rising from the center of the city like a mountain of living light. Its walls shifted through different colors as they approached, from deep blue to soft, green to warm gold. Vorthan guards stood at attention, their ceremonial armor gleaming. Inside the palace, they were led through corridors lined with artworks from across the galaxy. Nari recognized pieces from a dozen different civilizations, all displayed with obvious pride. "The king collects beautiful things," explained Counselor Tarn. "He has an eye for rare and precious items." They entered the throne room, a vast chamber with a ceiling that seemed to stretch into infinity. At the center sat King Veltar on a throne made of pure crystal. He was taller than the other Vorthans, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. His eyes were not silver like his people's, but deep black, like empty space. "Welcome, humans," the king said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Your species is most interesting. So young, yet so determined. So small, yet so ambitious." Ambassador Park stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, we are honored by your welcome. We come in peace, hoping to establish beneficial relations between our peoples." King Veltar smiled, but something about it made Nari uncomfortable. It was too wide, too knowing. "Peace, yes," the king said. "That is what we all desire. Tell me, Ambassador Park, what do your people value most?" "Knowledge, progress, and the safety of our families," Park replied. The king's black eyes moved across the human delegation, stopping on Hannah. "And children. You value your children above all else. This is admirable." Nari felt a chill run down her spine. The way the king looked at Hannah was wrong. It wasn't the look of someone admiring a child's innocence. It was the look of someone evaluating a prize. "Your Majesty," Nari said, stepping closer to her daughter. Perhaps we could discuss the medical exchange program we proposed. But King Veltar was no longer listening. He made a small gesture with his hand, and suddenly the chamber was filled with Vorthan guards. They moved with inhuman speed, surrounding the human delegation before anyone could react. "What is the meaning of this?" Ambassador Park demanded. King Veltar rose from his throne. "The meaning, Ambassador, is that your species has something mine desires. Your children are remarkably resilient, adaptable, and possess a spark that our own young lack. They will make excellent additions to my collection." "Collection?" Nari whispered, her blood turning to ice. "Oh yes," the king said, walking down from his throne. "I collect rare and beautiful things, remember? Human children are both rare and beautiful. They will be well cared for, I assure you. They will live in comfort, educated in our ways, displayed for the admiration of my court." Hana grabbed Nari's arm. "Mom, what's happening?" Before Nari could answer, the guards moved. They seized Hana along with 3 other young humans who had come with the delegation. Hana screamed and reached for her mother, but the guards were too strong. "No!" Nari lunged forward, but 2 guards caught her arms. "Let her go, take me instead." King Veltar laughed. "Adults are common, Dr. Kim. Children are precious. Your daughter will live a life of luxury, learning our superior ways. Consider it an honor, you monster." Nari fought against the guards holding her. "She's just a child. She is my property now," the king said calmly. "As are the others. They will be transported to my private menagerie where they will be safe and well protected." Ambassador Park tried to step forward. "Your Majesty, this is an act of war. The human government will not stand for this." "War?" King Veltar seemed amused. "Your little ships against my empire? I think not. You will return to your people and tell them what has happened. Tell them that their children are safe, but they belong to me now. Any attempt to rescue them will result in their immediate termination." The Aidanro guards began dragging the captured children toward a side exit. Hana's eyes were wide with terror as she called out to her mother, "Mom, don't let them take me." Nari struggled with every ounce of strength she had, but the guards holding her were too powerful. "Hana, I'll find you, I promise I'll find you." "How touching," King Veltar said. "A mother's love. It will make an interesting study. Perhaps I should have taken you as well, Dr. Kim. Your devotion to your offspring would make you an excellent servant." The children disappeared through the exit. Their screams echoed in the throne room until heavy doors cut off the sound. King Veltar returned to his throne. "Counselor Tarn will escort you back to your ship. You have 1 day to leave our system. Any human ship that returns will be destroyed." Nari felt something break inside her chest. Not her heart, that was still beating, pumping fire through her veins. Something deeper, something that had kept her civilized, reasonable, human. "I will come back," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "I will come back for my daughter." King Veltar smiled his terrible smile. "I look forward to it, Dr. Kim. Though I suspect you will find the experience rather different than you imagine." As the guards escorted the surviving humans from the palace, Nari looked back once at the crystal throne. King Veltar sat there, like a god, untouchable and arrogant. He had made one mistake. He had left her alive. That would be the last mistake he ever made. 2 years had passed since that terrible day in the Crystal Palace. Dr. Kim Nari was no longer the woman who had watched her daughter being taken. That woman had been weak, trusting, civilized. This woman was something else entirely. She stood in a dark alley in the outer districts of Vorthan Prime, her appearance completely changed. Her black hair was now silver blue, altered by genetic modifications she had performed on herself. Her brown eyes had become pale gray, and her skin had taken on a faint bluish tint. To any casual observer, she looked like a half-breed Vorthan from one of the outer colonies. The biomodifications had been painful but necessary. She had spent months studying Vorthan genetics, learning how to change her DNA structure cell by cell. The process had nearly killed her 3 times, but she had persevered. She had to. Hana was counting on her. "Jira," called a voice from behind her. That was her new name, her Vorthan identity. Jira Vental, a servant from the mining colonies looking for work in the capital. She turned to see Cole, her contact in the servant underground. He was a genuine Vorthon, but one who had grown tired of the Empire's cruel ways. "The palace is hiring new cleaners," Cole said quietly. "The head servant, Yara. She likes workers who keep quiet and work hard. I told her about you." Nari nodded. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning. But Jira, be careful. The palace is not like the outer districts. They watch everyone. One mistake, and you disappear." "I understand," Nari said. She had been preparing for this moment for 2 years. She knew the risks. The next morning, she entered the Crystal Palace through the servants' entrance. Her heart pounded as she walked through corridors she remembered from that horrible day. But she kept her face calm, her eyes down, playing the part of a humble servant. Yara was an old Vorthon with tired eyes and gray skin. She looked Nari up and down with the practiced gaze of someone who had hired thousands of servants. "You're from the Kelvar colonies?" Yara asked. "Yes, ma'am. My family lost everything in the mining accident. And you can read and write?" "Basic level only." Nari lied. She could now read and write Vorthon better than most natives. But servants weren't supposed to be educated. "Good. Too much education makes servants think too much. You'll start in the outer wings, clean, dust, stay quiet. The pay is fair, the work is steady, 'cause no trouble and you can stay as long as you like." Nari bowed deeply. "Thank you, ma'am. I won't disappoint you." For the first 6 months, she cleaned floors and polished crystal walls. She listened to gossip among the other servants. She learned the palace schedule, the guard rotations, the habits of the nobles. Most importantly, she learned about the king. King Veltar was more cruel than she had imagined. The servants whispered about his collection of living beings from across the galaxy. They spoke of the menagerie, a secret section of the palace where he kept his prizes. Some servants had seen it, but they never talked about it openly. The fear in their eyes was enough. During her 8th month in the palace, Nari got her first glimpse of the menagerie. She was cleaning near the restricted section when a door opened briefly. Through the gap, she saw cages. In one cage, she saw a flash of familiar black hair. Hana, her daughter, was alive. That night, Nari returned to her small room in the servants' quarters and cried for the first time in 2 years. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief and renewed determination. The next day, she began the second phase of her plan. She started by studying the palace's power system. The Vorthons drew their energy from massive crystals that grew deep beneath the planet. But the royal palace had something special, something the servants called the Heartstone. It was connected directly to the king's throne and gave him incredible power. Through careful eavesdropping, she learned that the Heartstone was more than just a power source. It was a repository of consciousness, containing the minds of every Vorthon king who had ever ruled. When a new king took the throne, he connected his mind to the stone and gained access to centuries of knowledge and power. This connection made King Veltar nearly invincible, but it also created a weakness. During the connection ritual, which happened once every few months, the king was vulnerable for a few crucial minutes. Nari began to prepare for that moment. She used her knowledge of biochemistry to create special compounds that would disrupt neural connections. Working in secret, she synthesized microscopic machines that could interfere with the bioelectric signals between brain and crystal. But first, she needed to get closer to the king. She began volunteering for extra duties, slowly working her way up in the servant hierarchy. She proved herself reliable, invisible, trustworthy. After a year, she was promoted to cleaning the inner palace. This gave her access to the royal dining hall, the king's private chambers, and most importantly, the throne room where the Heartstone waited. She also began gathering information about the palace's defenses. She memorized guard schedules, mapped escape routes, and identified the locations of security systems. She learned which guards could be bribed, which ones were completely loyal, and which ones had secrets they wanted to keep hidden. The most important discovery came during her 15th month in the palace. While cleaning near the king's private Study. She overheard a conversation between King Veltar and his chief advisor. The human children are adapting well, the advisor said, especially the female specimen from the first group. She shows remarkable intelligence. Good, King Veltar replied. I want her prepared for the next exhibition. The visiting nobles from the Kethmore system will be impressed by such a rare prize. Nari's hands shook as she continued dusting. They were going to display Hana like an animal in a zoo. That night, she made her decision. She couldn't wait any longer. The next heart stone ceremony was in 3 weeks. She would use that opportunity to begin her real plan. But first she needed to get even closer to the king. She needed him to trust her, to see her as just another loyal servant. She needed to become invisible in plain sight. She began the most dangerous part of her infiltration. She started poisoning the king's food. Not enough to kill him, not yet. Just enough to make him slightly sick, slightly paranoid. She added compounds that would make him distrust his current servants, making him want new ones. Servants he would choose personally. Within 2 weeks, King Veltar was complaining about the quality of his service. He demanded new personal attendants, ones who would be completely loyal to him alone. Yara, the head servant, recommended her most reliable workers. Jira Vental was at the top of the list. This one has been with us for over a year, Yara told the king. She never speaks unless spoken to, never asks questions, never causes trouble. Perfect for your personal service. King Veltar looked at Nari with those terrible black eyes. For a moment she thought he might recognize her. But all he saw was a humble servant, changed and broken by years of hard work. Very well, he said. She will do. And just like that, Nari became one of King Veltar's personal servants. She would clean his chambers, serve his meals, tend to his needs. She would be close enough to touch him, close enough to destroy him as... She bowed before the man who had stolen her daughter. Nari allowed herself a small, cold smile. King Veltar thought he was gaining a loyal servant. He had no idea he had just invited his own death into his home. 6 months had passed since Nari became King Veltar's personal servant. In that time, she had learned more about the Vorthon royal court than most nobles knew in a lifetime. She had also begun to systematically destroy it from within. Her first target was Commander Resk, the head of palace security. He was the king's most trusted military advisor and the man responsible for keeping the menagerie secure. More importantly, he was the one who had personally overseen Hana's capture. Nari had discovered that Commander Resk had a weakness. He was secretly selling information about palace defenses to rival noble houses. It was a small betrayal. Barely, enough to cause real damage, but it was enough to destroy him. She carefully planted evidence of his larger betrayals, making it look like he was planning to sell the king's location to human forces. She forged communications between Resk and human military commanders, promising them access to the palace in exchange for gold. When King Veltar discovered the false evidence, his rage was terrible to behold. Commander Resk was dragged from his chambers in the middle of the night. The king executed him personally, using the Heartstone's power to burn away his consciousness while leaving his body alive as a warning to others. Nari watched from the shadows as the man who had taken her daughter died, screaming. She felt no satisfaction, only cold determination. 1 down, dozens to go. Her next target was Lady Zira, the king's chief advisor on alien affairs. Lady Zira had been the one to suggest capturing human children in the first place. She had written detailed reports about human psychology, explaining how to break their spirits and make them compliant. Lady Zira's weakness was her ambition. She desperately wanted to replace the king's current heir, Prince Darvan, with her own son. Nari helped her along by providing fake intelligence about the prince's plans to overthrow his father. The false information led to Prince Darvan's arrest and execution. But instead of promoting Lady Zira's son, King Veltar became suspicious of everyone around him. In his paranoia, he decided that Lady Zira was the real threat and had her thrown into the dungeons. 2 of the king's most trusted advisors were gone. The court was in chaos with nobles turning on each other in fear. But Nari was just getting started. She began targeting the guards who worked in the menagerie. These were the men who fed her daughter, who kept her locked in a cage like an animal. Each of them met a different fate. Guard Captain Velkar died from a poison that made it look like his heart had failed. Sergeant Tolvin was found dead in his quarters, apparently killed by a rival over gambling debts. Guard Yintal simply disappeared one night, his body never found. With each death, Nari grew bolder. She was learning to kill with the cold efficiency of a machine. Her medical knowledge made her an expert at causing deaths that looked natural or accidental. Her understanding of Vorthan psychology helped her manipulate their paranoid culture. But her greatest achievement was getting close to General Caney, the king's military commander. General Caney was different from the others. He was intelligent, careful, and genuinely loyal to the king. He couldn't be framed or manipulated like the others. So Nari decided to seduce him instead. It wasn't easy. She had to suppress every instinct that screamed at her to kill him immediately. Caney had been present during Hana's capture. He had helped plan the raid that stole her daughter. But she needed what he knew. She began by appearing vulnerable around him. She would stumble while carrying heavy items, letting him help her. She would ask innocent questions about palace security, pretending to be worried about her own safety. Slowly, she built a relationship with him. General Caney was lonely. His position made it impossible for him to trust anyone completely. When a humble servant showed him kindness without wanting anything in return, he began to let his guard down. It took months, but eventually he began confiding in her. He told her about the palace's deepest secrets, the hidden passages, the emergency protocols. He explained how the Heartstone worked, how the king connected to it during the ritual ceremonies. Most importantly, he told her about the menagerie's security systems. He described the energy barriers, the guard rotations, the location of every camera and sensor. He even showed her the master control room, thinking she was just a curious servant girl. Nari absorbed every piece of information like a sponge. She memorized floor plans, guard schedules, and security codes. She learned about the king's daily routine, his habits, his fears. She also learned about the Heartstone's true nature. It wasn't just a repository of consciousness. It was a living entity that fed on the minds it absorbed. Every king who had connected to it had given up part of their soul in exchange for power. The stone was hungry, always looking for new consciousness to devour. This gave Nari an idea. If she could somehow connect to the Heartstone herself, she might be able to absorb its power instead of being consumed by it. But that would require modifying her own brain structure to interface with Vorthan technology. She began secretly experimenting on herself again. Using medical equipment stolen from the palace infirmary, she implanted tiny neural interfaces in her own brain. The process was agonizing and dangerous, but she had no choice. She needed every advantage she could get. The modifications allowed her to partially connect with Vorthan technology. She could now access their computer systems, control their security cameras, and even influence their communication networks. She was becoming something more than human, but she didn't care. All that mattered was saving Hana. After 8 months of careful preparation, Nari was ready to make her move. She had eliminated most of the king's trusted advisors. She had learned all of his secrets. She had positioned herself as his most loyal servant, but first, she had to deal with General Caney. She waited until the night before the next Heartstone ceremony. Caney had invited her to his private chambers, something that had become a regular occurrence. He trusted her completely now, saw her as his confidant and lover. As they sat together in his quarters, sharing wine and talking about the future, Nari made her move. The wine was poisoned with a compound that would stop his heart in exactly 10 minutes, long enough for her to get the information she needed, not long enough for him to call for help. "Caney," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He looked at her with genuine affection. "What is it, my dear?" "My name isn't Jira Vental," she said. "It's Dr. Kim Nari. I'm the mother of the human child in the menagerie." The color drained from his face. He reached for his weapon, but the poison was already taking effect. His hand shook too much to draw his sword. You, he whispered. You're the one who's been killing everyone. Yes, Nari said calmly. And now I'm going to kill you too. But first, I want you to tell me exactly how to get into the menagerie without triggering the alarms. Caney tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. I won't help you. You don't have a choice, Nari said. The poison in your wine will kill you in about 7 minutes. I can give you the antidote, but only if you cooperate. It was a lie. There was no antidote, but Caney didn't know that. For the next 6 minutes, she extracted every piece of information she needed. Access codes, security protocols, guard schedules, everything required to reach her daughter. When Caney finally died, Nari felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no guilt. She had become exactly what she needed to be, a cold and efficient killer. Tomorrow was the Heartstone ceremony. King Veltar would connect to the ancient artifact, absorbing the power of his ancestors. But this time, something would go wrong. This time, the stone would find a new host. Nari looked out the window at the crystal spires of the palace. Somewhere, in this building, her daughter was waiting. After 2.5 years of planning, preparation, and killing, she was finally ready. Tomorrow, King Veltar would learn what it meant to take something precious from a human mother. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The day of the Heartstone ceremony arrived with blood-red sunrise. Nari stood in the king's private chambers, helping him prepare for the ritual that would renew his connection to the ancient power source. Her hands were steady as she arranged his ceremonial robes, but inside, her heart was pounding like a war drum. King Veltar seemed unusually nervous. The deaths of his advisors had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. He had been having nightmares, seeing enemies in every shadow. The paranoia that Nari had carefully cultivated was finally bearing fruit. Jira, he said, using her false name. I want you to remain close during the ceremony. Something feels wrong today. Of course, Your Majesty, Nari replied, keeping her voice humble and concerned. I will stay by your side. If only he knew how close she intended to stay. The ceremony took place in the heart chamber, deep beneath the palace. It was a vast room, carved from living rock, with the Heartstone at its center. The stone was enormous, easily 10 feet tall, pulsing with inner light that made the air itself seem alive. Dozens of nobles and high-ranking officials attended the ceremony, all dressed in their finest robes. They stood in a circle around the Heartstone, chanting in the ancient Vortan language. The sound was hypnotic, building in intensity as the ritual progressed. King Veltar walked slowly toward the stone, his black eyes reflecting its glow. This was the moment when he would place his hands on its surface and allow his consciousness to merge with the accumulated wisdom of his ancestors. The process usually took about an hour, during which he would be completely vulnerable. Nari had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Over the past month, she had been introducing microscopic nanobots into the king's food. The tiny machines were designed to interfere with neural transmission, but only when activated by a specific signal. Until then, they remained dormant in his bloodstream. She had also modified the Heartstone itself. During her late-night cleaning duties, she had managed to place several small devices inside its crystal matrix. These devices would redirect the stone's energy at the crucial moment, channeling it toward her instead of the king. As King Veltar approached the Heartstone, Nari moved closer to the circle of nobles. She had positioned herself carefully, close, enough to act but far enough away to avoid immediate suspicion. The king placed his hands on the stone's surface. Immediately, the crystal began to glow brighter. Lines of energy ran up his arms, connecting him to the vast network of consciousness within the stone. His eyes rolled back in his head as the minds of ancient kings flooded into his thoughts. This was the moment. Nari activated the nanobots with a thought, using the neural interface she had implanted in her own brain. The microscopic machines immediately began disrupting the king's neural pathways, breaking his connection to the Heartstone. King Veltar screamed. The energy flowing through him became chaotic, painful. He tried to pull his hands away from the stone, but found himself trapped. The connection that should have been smooth and natural had become a burning agony. The nobles around the circle began to panic. Some tried to approach the king, but the energy field around the Heartstone had become dangerous. Anyone who got too close was thrown back by crackling bolts of power. "Something is wrong," shouted Lord Caven, one of the few remaining advisors. "The king is in danger." Nari stepped forward, pretending to be concerned. "What can we do to help? Him?" "Nothing," replied the high priest who was conducting the ceremony. "The ritual cannot be interrupted. We must wait for it to complete." But Nari wasn't waiting. She began moving toward the Heartstone, using her modified neural interface to shield herself from its chaotic energy. The nanobots in the king's system were doing their job, preventing him from gaining control of the stone's power. King Veltar's eyes found her as she approached. For a moment, his expression was confused. Then recognition dawned in his features. "You," he gasped, his voice barely audible over the energy crackling around him. "You're not Jira. You're the human woman, the one whose child I took." Nari smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it was a genuine expression. "Hello, Your Majesty. I told you I would come back for my daughter." The nobles around the circle began to realize what was happening. Several guards started moving toward Nari, but she was already touching the Heartstone's surface. The moment her skin made contact with the crystal, everything changed. The stone's energy, confused and chaotic from the king's disrupted connection, found a new host. But instead of overwhelming her as it should have, the energy flowed into the neural pathways she had carefully prepared. The pain was incredible. It felt like her brain was being rewritten. Her consciousness expanded beyond human limits. But she had prepared for this. The modifications she had made to herself allowed her to absorb the stone's power without being destroyed by it. King Veltar watched in horror as the energy that should have been his flowed into the human woman. "Impossible," he whispered. "No alien mind can survive connection to the Heartstone." "I'm not just any alien," Nari replied, her voice now carrying harmonics that made the crystal walls resonate. "I'm a mother who's come for her child." The power flowing through her was beyond anything she had imagined. She could feel the consciousness of every Vorthon king who had ever ruled, their memories and knowledge becoming part of her. But unlike them, she didn't surrender her identity to the stone. Instead, she dominated it, forcing it to serve her will. King Veltar tried to break his connection to the stone, but it was too late. The energy link that bound him to the crystal had become a chain. Nari reached out with her new power and seized control of his consciousness. "What are you doing to me?" the king screamed. "I'm taking everything you are," Nari replied. "Your power, your knowledge, your memories. And then I'm going to trap what's left of you inside this stone, where you can experience every moment of suffering you've caused others." The nobles around the circle finally understood what was happening. Some tried to flee, others called for guards, but it was too late. The Heartstone was now under Nari's control, and with it, the power that ruled the entire Vorthon Empire. She reached deeper into King Veltar's mind, pulling out his memories like pages from a book. She saw his plans for conquest, his pleasure in causing pain, his complete lack of empathy for other beings. She also saw memories of Hana, images of her daughter in the menagerie, frightened and alone. The rage that filled her was beyond human emotion. It was the fury of a mother amplified by the power of ancient kings. She squeezed the king's consciousness like a fist, crushing his identity piece by piece. "Please," King Veltar begged, his voice now weak and broken. "Have mercy." "Mercy?" Nari laughed, and the sound made the crystal walls crack. "Did you show mercy to my 15-year-old daughter when you threw her in a cage? Did you show mercy to the hundreds of other children you've collected over the years?" She began the final phase of her plan. Using the Heartstone's power, she reached into King Veltar's mind and began to extract his soul. Not to destroy it, but to trap it within the crystal itself, where it would remain conscious and aware but completely powerless. The king's body began to convulse as his consciousness was pulled from it. "No," he screamed. "I am the king. I am immortal." "You were the king," Nari corrected. "Now you're just another prisoner in my collection." With a final surge of power, she completed the transfer. King Veltar's soul was pulled into the heart stone, where it joined the consciousness of his ancestors. But unlike them, who had merged willingly with the stone, he remained separate and aware, trapped in a prison of crystal and energy. His body collapsed to the floor, empty but still breathing. A perfect shell without a soul. Nari stood before the heartstone, power flowing through her like liquid fire. She was no longer entirely human, but she was still herself. Still a mother who had come to save her daughter. The nobles around the circle knelt before her, recognizing the power she now wielded. The guards who had been approaching stopped in their tracks, afraid to challenge someone who commanded the heartstone itself. "I am your queen now," Nari announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "And my first royal decree is the immediate liberation of all sentient beings held in the menagerie." She looked down at King Veltar's empty body and smiled. "Your Majesty can watch from inside the stone as I undo everything you've built. Every act of cruelty, every moment of suffering you've caused, I will reverse it all." The power of the Heartstone pulsed through her, and with it came the ability to reshape the entire Vorthan Empire. She would free the slaves, dismantle the military, and transform a civilization built on conquest into something better. But first she had a daughter to save. The war was over. She had won. But as she felt King Veltar's consciousness screaming silently within the Heartstone, Nari wondered if victory was supposed to feel this empty. She pushed the thought aside. There would be time for regret later. Right now, Hana was waiting for her. The menagerie was hidden 3 levels below the main palace, accessible only through a series of secured passages that few knew existed. As the new queen of the Vorthan Empire, Nari had access to everything. The guards who once protected King Veltar's collection now obeyed her commands without question. She walked through the corridors with measured steps, the Heartstone's power flowing through her like molten metal in her veins. Her appearance had changed dramatically during the ritual. Her eyes now glowed with the same crystalline light as the Heartstone itself. Her skin had taken on a faint luminescent quality, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that could make crystal sing or shatter. The first chamber of the menagerie contained creatures from a dozen different worlds. Floating jellyfish-like beings from the gas giant Nephros drifted in special atmospheric tanks. Crystalline trees from the silicon world of Vextar grew in carefully controlled gardens. Most heartbreaking of all were the sentient beings, locked in energy cages that prevented them from using their natural abilities. But Nari barely noticed them. She was focused on one thing, one person. At the far end of the menagerie, in a section reserved for the most prized specimens, she found what she was looking for. Hana sat in the corner of her cage, reading a book written in Vorthan script. She had grown taller in the 3 years since her capture, her face more mature but still bearing the features Nari remembered. Her black hair was longer now, and she wore simple gray clothes that marked her as property of the royal collection. For a moment, Nari couldn't move. She had imagined this reunion thousands of times, but seeing her daughter alive and safe overwhelmed her completely. All the pain, all the killing, all the sacrifices had been worth this single moment. "Hana," she whispered. Her daughter looked up, and their eyes met through the energy barrier. Hana's expression went through several changes: confusion, disbelief, hope, and finally recognition. "Mom?" Hana's voice was uncertain, as if she couldn't trust what she was seeing. Nari reached out with the Heartstone's power and deactivated the energy cage. The barrier flickered and disappeared, leaving nothing between mother and daughter except empty air. Hana stood slowly, as if afraid the cage might reappear. "Is it really you? You look so different." "It's me, sweetheart," Nari said, stepping into the cage. "I promised I would come back for you." Hana ran into her arms, and for a moment, Nari felt completely human again. This was what mattered. This was what everything had been for. Her daughter was safe, alive, and in her arms. But the reunion was not what either of them had expected. As Hana hugged her, she pulled back with a gasp. "Mom, you're so cold, and your eyes, they're glowing." Nari looked down at her hands and saw that Hana was right. Her skin was pale and luminescent, and she could feel the alien power flowing through her body like ice water. The Heartstone had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. I had to change to save you, Nari explained. I had to become something else. What happened to the king? Hana asked. The guards said there was a ceremony, but then everything went crazy. They said we might be freed, but they didn't know by who. The king is gone, Nari said simply. I dealt with him. Over the next hour, she freed every sentient being in the menagerie. Creatures from dozens of worlds walked free for the first time in years. Some wept, others sang, and a few simply stood in stunned silence as they realized their captivity was over. But as Nari watched her daughter interact with the other freed prisoners, she began to notice something troubling. Hana seemed afraid of her, not afraid for her safety, but afraid of what her mother had become. Hana, Nari said as they walked through the palace together. What's wrong? It's just, Hana hesitated. You're different, Mom. The way you move, the way you talk, even the way you look at people. It's like you're not entirely there. Nari was about to reassure her when she caught her reflection in one of the crystal walls. The face looking back at her was beautiful in an alien way, but it wasn't entirely human anymore. Her features had taken on the sharp, elegant lines of Vorthan nobility. Her eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. More disturbing was the way she felt inside. The consciousness of ancient Vorthan kings whispered constantly in her mind, sharing their memories and their hunger for power. She could feel King Veltar's soul trapped within the Heartstone, screaming silently as he experienced every moment of suffering he had ever caused. Part of her enjoyed his torment. That part was growing stronger every day. I'm still your mother, Nari said, but even to her own ears the words sounded hollow. Over the following weeks, Nari worked to reshape the Vorthan Empire. She dissolved the military conquest programs, freed the slave worlds, and established trade relationships instead of tributary arrangements. She was a fair and just ruler, but her methods were absolute. Those who opposed her reforms simply disappeared. Not killed, but absorbed into the heart stone where their consciousness joined the growing collection of minds under her control. She told herself it was mercy, that they would be happier as part of something greater than themselves. But late at night, when she sat on the crystal throne that had once belonged to King Veltar, she could hear all of them whispering. Hundreds of voices, some grateful, some pleading, some screaming in eternal torment. The worst part was how natural it felt. Hana tried to adapt to their new life, but the distance between them grew wider each day. Her daughter would flinch whenever Nari touched her, as if her skin was too cold or her presence too overwhelming. During conversations, Hana would look at her with a mixture of love and fear that broke what remained of Nari's human heart. Want to go home? Hana said one evening as they sat together in the royal chambers. This is our home now, Nari replied. I'm the queen. We can make this world into anything we want. But it's not Earth, Hana said quietly. And you're not really my mom anymore, are you? The question hit Nari like a physical blow. Of course I'm your mother. Everything I did was for you. No, Hana said, tears running down her face. My mom was Dr. Kim Nari, a scientist who loved helping people. You're something else. You're powerful and terrible and beautiful, but you're not her. Nari wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a queen with godlike power and alien beauty. When she spoke, her voice could command armies or shatter stone. When she touched the Heartstone, she could feel the consciousness of everyone she had ever absorbed, their thoughts and memories becoming part of her own. She had gained everything and lost herself in the process. I can change back, Nari said, desperately. I can give up the power, become human again. But they both knew it was impossible. The Heartstone's power had become part of her essence. She was connected to it,